Welcome to Tex on Tex. This is Jed Sundwall. This month we're joined by Noah Iliinsky to talk about the book China Mountain Zhang by Maureen F. McHugh. I really enjoyed this book. I'm really glad that Noah introduced me to it. We talk about this in the podcast, but I'd never heard of it before. It really came out of nowhere for me. It's one of the joys of doing this podcast is that it's an excuse to spend time talking with smart people like Noah, and then also learning about. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of the podcast is to learn about books that have shaped them. And this is just one that came out of nowhere for me, and I loved it. We also talk about this in the podcast, but it's a really remarkable book in that it's definitely a science fiction book. It's a, some kind of dystopian future or just, interesting, weird future book, but there are no heroes. There's no grand narrative or anything like that. It's just a story about being human in the world about 100 years in the future or so. And it's a very different world. Anyway, really, really great conversation. Noah's, as you'll learn, is very insightful, a very skilled and deep thinker about design, and really love talking to him about this. So see you on the other side. All right, Noah, welcome to Tex on Tex.
Hi, Jed. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this with me. So we're going to talk about, again, I think China Mountain Zhang is how it's pronounced by Maureen F. McHugh. Thank you for recommending this to me.
I've got, just for cred, I've got my old paperbacks here, and you can see how loved on these are. I have two copies because I bought an extra copy because, this one was falling apart. But also, you got to have one to loan. Because back in the day, you couldn't just send somebody the EPUB. It'd be like, take this book and read it.
Yeah, that's all right. You have the real bona fides to discuss this book.
Yeah.
I only have one copy. So before we get into it, are you a technologist?
I am a technologist. I design technology for people to use.
Okay. Tell me more.
Yeah, growing up, I was like a Legos kid. I was always building things and working in the wood shop. And I thought that meant I had to be an engineer. And I didn't want to get stuck in an engineering building for 4 years or be in an all engineering school. So I went to a liberal arts college, Reed College in Portland, fantastic school. And they don't have an engineering department. So I got a physics degree, which is harder than it sounds. Yeah. And while I was there, I sort of had this revelation that the piece of what I was in my mind calling engineering, the piece of that was most interesting to me, wasn't exactly the underlying technology. I'm going to say things that sound dismissive, but they're not. Mechanical engineering is a commodity skill. It's important and it's valuable, but you can hire that. You can get that. Industrial design. There's different quality levels, high and low, but that's available. Electrical engineering, that's available. And I realized the piece, which I'm going to differentiate from industrial design, the piece that was most interesting to me, this is as I'm going through college, was the human interface piece of it. And we didn't have, UX wasn't a thing in this era, interface design, right? Because we were still talking about physical, tactile things for the most part. There was not a whole lot of digital stuff. I had my mind blown by the Macintosh in the summer of 1987. I'm dating myself here, and saw my first Mac Plus and was like, "That's it. That's the better way." And kind of have been an Apple fanboy since then, highs and lows, right? But this sort of human first approach to tools, to make tools more accessible, to make tools more effective, kind of has always been my North Star. And even as a kid, I would look at things in the physical world and say, why did they do it that way? If they had done it this other way, it would have been much better. Let's make this better. And so thought I had to be an engineer. But realized in college that that really designer was the slice of it for me. And I read this book, I think, between my junior and senior years of college. And so this vision, you picked it out in an earlier conversation. There's the chapter in particular where he gets the organic engineering, the Dow engineering, and I just find that chapter and that sort of that the approach that McHugh describes them doing, which we'll get into in a second, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And his sort of triumph and his leveling up into that, as both like this beautiful vision for how design could be done, should be done, maybe
Yeah.
not necessarily, but could be, and it's this pivotal moment in his identity, right, where he gets it, and he sort of makes this leap from, he's got this very self-deprecating, sort of identity of like, well, I'm just kind of a dumb construction tech. I'm never going to be one of these fancy engineers. And then not only does he become a fancy engineer, he becomes like the cream of the crop, most elite of all engineers in the world. And there's only a few, and you can only get trained in China. And like, and he levels up completely. And so that's that pivotal moment in that chapter.
Yeah. So I love it. Yeah. I mean, thank you again for recommending this book to me. I'd never heard of it. I've never heard of McHugh. Just kind of, this is like, I'm also like thanking myself for starting this podcast, because it's like, it is sort of the gift of doing something like this, where it's like, we have our mutual friends, Jessica and Tyrell. They're like, you should have Noah on your podcast. I'm like, oh, that's right. Like, Noah's really interesting. And I love, you're the only person I think to quite do this. I mean, your response was like so clear. I was like, do you want to be on my podcast? You're like, yes, I'd like to talk about this book because it made me a better designer. I'm like, oh, yeah, great. Like, easy.
Yeah. It
won awards when it came out. I mean, did you remember how you first encountered it or why?
Like, I don't remember it. It might have been on a recommended or award winners bookshelf at a physical library or something. I don't recall.
Yeah. It doesn't seem so. This is an all spoilers podcast, so I'll just give it all away. So it's the story of this guy. What is his name? Is Raphael? I mean, I forget his Chinese name.
Zhang Shan, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. But and lives in Brooklyn, in a what seems like it may be a few centuries in the future.
It's middle. It's like late 21st, early 22nd century.
Oh, really?
It's not real far ahead. Yeah, because they talk about the U.S. melting down in the early 21st century in the Revolution,
right?
And he talks about the subway system in New York. He's like, it's a little over a century old, although I think it's probably almost a century old at this point. So, yeah, I think it's definitely 21st century. It's not much further ahead than that.
Okay, so it's near to mid future. Yeah, but yeah, like. I actually have, so I have a few notes printed out. I always do this. I take notes just like in a text file. And then when I'm on the podcast, or especially if I'm recording in person, I don't have access to them. Like, right. So I'm like, I finally like print it out. But it's at the end.
I've got you matched. I didn't have a digital copy of this. I checked it out from the library, and then I immediately went and bought a copy from the publisher. But the library one's the first one that made it onto my Kobo. So all my highlights are in the library copy, which was automatically returned.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Well, I have some notes, but yeah, so this is a funny portrayal of America. This is towards the end of the book, where they're just sort of discussing history, because he's teaching. Where I'm saying all this a little bit out of order, but just to set the scene of the world that the book is set in. It says, in the early 21st century, the national debt and the trade deficit of the old United States precipitated the Second Depression. In effect, the country went bankrupt, and as a result, so did the economy of every first world nation at the time except for Japan, which managed to keep from total bankruptcy but lost most of its markets. Yep. And for Canada and Australia, which created the Canadian-Australian Alliance, a holding measure to preserve their own systems, which survives until this day. I'm like, oh boy. This feels prophetic.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so it's a world where China rules, basically.
And this is a book that was written 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. So this book was written in the Bush Senior administration, roughly.
Yeah. So McHugh prophesied something. And so this is I'll just say this. It's a very plausible future. Doesn't sound crazy. There's lots of interesting technology and whatever, but this is really just a coming of age story about this young man who is an American-born Chinese, sort of, because I think he has like Filipino and some sort of like Hispanic descent.
Yes, one of his parents. Yes.
Yeah, and is clearly smart. Is sort of like just sort of naturally gifted in some way, but is just sort of held back by societal pressures. He's not like a native Chinese person, and he's
China
really
being the
worried.
dominant political power at this time.
That's right. Yeah. And that influencing people's career advancement and educational opportunities and things like that. Uh, but he somehow finds his way to China and makes it in. And, it starts out with him being a construction tech and just generally being frustrated, but he makes his way to what you were alluding to before, to getting basically the best education you can get as an engineer and learning this new form of engineering, of computer assisted engineering
Yes.
called Taoist engineering. And then
Oh,
returning
that's his
home.
shorthand name. They call it organic engineering, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
organic engineering. He calls it Taoist engineering. I think it's very beautiful. And then he ultimately is sort of afforded these incredible career opportunities. He can make insane amounts of money, redeveloping the West, which has apparently been obliterated by some climate catastrophe. But he decides to stay in Brooklyn and be a teacher and stay with his people and teach organic engineering in Brooklyn, which is just sort of like a very exciting thing that wasn't really available there
Yeah.
without him. So it's a really nice coming of age story. Also, a very interesting story that he's gay. This is I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what it's like to be gay, or it's certainly not. I don't know what it's like to be gay in a repressive society. But I feel like the book does a good job about this.
Yeah.
I think you said you have a friend who.
Yeah. So
corroborated
the summer I read it, a couple of summers, one of my roommates was a friend of mine who's gay, friend of mine from college, and I gave
that.
him this book because I was like, "This is an incredible book. You should read this book." It blew my mind about design and engineering, and he read it and he
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
"That is the best depiction of being closeted and gay that I've ever read."
Wow. Yeah, it's suffocating. It's really like tragic. Obviously, there's a story. One of his boyfriends ends up committing suicide because he's about to be outed,
Yep.
and that has a big effect on Zhang, and sort of spurs him to train harder and to study harder and to become what he becomes. But
Nope.
yeah, it was. It's a remarkably well written story. And I'm sorry, just one other like anecdote about the part where he's gay. There's a storyline with it. Another thing about the book is that it's just sort of a weird book. It's just sort of the few episodes that overlap in some ways, but kind of a thin plot in a lot of ways. Like I really did summarize it. Yeah.
I read an interview with her, some commentary. So apparently this is a thing I didn't know. This is called a mosaic novel, where it's just different sort of interwoven, like a mosaic, interwoven pieces. And she said, so much of science fiction is, the lone hero or the small team that has this massive outsized impact on society or on the galaxy or on the politics. And I didn't want to write that book. She said, I wanted to write a book about someone who kind of felt powerless in the face of society and in the face of politics, and just had a mundane existence and was just doing their thing to get by. And that, that's so much more relatable for most of us, right? Like there's plenty of people who would like to believe that they're the hero who are going to save everything. But for most of us, a lot of the time we do feel powerless, and just getting by is the triumph we got, right?
Yeah.
And
that's
and
wonderful.
The shape of that, impacted the book. And there's 3 or 4 other storylines, like you said, of other characters that sort of intersect with Zhang's plot line in sort of peripheral ways, but they build out the view of the world.
Right. Yeah. It's wonderful. Catch-22 is the first book I ever read that's like that, like a mosaic novel, and it's so effective. Long
time.
It's really good. But no, there's what I was gonna say. There's a very funny kind of like end to like the gay story, which is he gets set up with his boss's daughter. It's like the first thing that happens in the book.
Yes.
And there's some strange things about this, but like she's very ugly. Like it's just made very clear. Like she's not an attractive girl. Like there's something wrong. She has like no chin. And she later has cosmetic surgery to fix it, and it makes a huge difference. And there's a whole other story about that was very hard to read. But anyway, she encounters him later on, like years later, after like she felt spurned by him and rejected by him, and was just kind of like wondering like what's wrong with me. And then like they run into each other in New York, and she gets on a train, and like as the train, like the doors are about to close, he's like, I'm gay. And she's like, huh? And then the train just pulls out and like, that's it. Like,
Yeah.
she gets the closure she needs. And like, he finally is able to come out and make her feel better about herself because he felt bad for rejecting her,
Right.
And so finally he's able to say like, I'm gay. And she just leaves.
And there's a side note where he's like, and I'm glad I didn't have to possibly see her being disgusted by it.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't sure exactly how that was going to go either, because it's illegal and etc. So who knows
Totally.
what her response was going to be.
Yeah, I mean that's something I do. I am quite aware of having been raised in a religious community and having gay friends that are like, that's a whole other part of it. Is you don't want to have to feel like viscerally rejected in that sort of deeper way that can happen. It's anyway. So the book is just so well written. So, over to you. I mean, do you want to talk about organic engineering specifically?
Sure. He does this hardship duty, this miserable assignment in the Arctic for a year, and that's what gets him like the bonus ranking that lets him go to college in China. And he gets invited to this university where they teach what they call organic engineering, and it's this very sort of rarefied elite thing, and it's not the way everybody does it. It's like a very few people do this. And it involves, so they've all got a jack on their wrist, and that's how you operate. Like when he's a construction tech, he's like a heavy equipment operator, right? Laser cutters and whatever. And so he always talks about jacking in, or you jack in to watch the kite races. So people have got a little bit of a neurofeedback system. So, in the way that they envision this organic engineering, you have all the computation power of the system is available to you in this sort of very what is meant to be this very sort of passive way, where you're not asking it for things. You just go in and start to do the work, and the computer holds for you all of the complexity and all the scope and all the volume of detail that you can't track all at once in your head, but it is available. It works as an extension of your own cognition. And so he shows up at the headquarters of this incredible, world-class, amazing Chinese engineering firm, and their headquarters is this building that beautifully flows down the side of the mountain and has the classical Chinese roofs and is just this incredible piece of architecture, and every detail inside is perfect and wonderful. And his mentor in organic engineering says, oh yeah, this building was designed by one woman.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's not possible. And he's like, well, it took 2 years, but that's what organic engineering is capable of, where one engineer picks the color of the carpet and does the HVAC, and how do the windows look, and what is the roofing material, and how does it integrate architecturally into the landscape. And one engineer does this whole thing, and it's too much, right? It's too much for one human brain, especially this amazing, beautiful, entire complex. So the first thing that inspired me about how this is done is like this notion that one person could sort of holistically conceive of an entire product deliverable. In his situation, it's all about building, right? His whole career has been about building, tech, engineering, whatever, construction. It's construction. But in this world, there's also organic architects. And the sort of this throwaway line, which resonated very strongly for me, is, well, the architects really lean into the aesthetics and the shape of the building, and they tend to sort of skip when it comes to thinking about the technical details like the HVAC. And the organic engineers do the opposite. They nail all the technical details, and most of them aren't quite so strong on the architecture. So even then, people have their strengths and weaknesses. Part of the thing that has in rereading this that has resonated strongly with me is I am an engineering designer, not an architecture designer, except I am an architect. But I'm not an aesthetic designer for the most part. I don't do fonts and colors and branding and making things pretty, but I do deep structural function and flow to make complex products for technical users functional and viable, right? And so that part, rereading this now, really resonated. Like, yeah, there's people, even within this sort of collective discipline, there's people who skew one way or the other into one of these strengths. But so the first part that was really inspiring was the fact that you could have one person who could see the whole thing, who you didn't get just your one little piece of like, you're going to make it pretty and you're going to make it functional and you're going to figure out the engineering, et cetera. And there are some people in the world who, particularly in software, who can do all the pieces, right? There's indie game designers. The guy who did Stardew Valley, for example, is like one guy who did all the art and all the programming and all the music, and like he did it all, right? And like that's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's part one, is this sort of holistic approach, and then part two is the way that they do it. Instead of jacking in physically, they get what they call attuned to the system. You enter the building of this engineering headquarters, and you go get calibrated, and then the building's just listening to you.
Right.
And to do the design mode, you sort of meditate the building. And if you
Right.
get too analytical or too prescriptive and you say, we're going to go use that material of stone for the floor, it kicks you out because you're doing it wrong. And what you're
Right.
meant to do is go in and just dream it almost. But it's
Right.
very much this meditative state. And that's his joke about, oh, it's this Taoist thing. It's this Taoist engineering of like, you can't
Right.
think about it. You just have to sort of feel it. And so there's this whole, it's very much like a martial arts training. In
Like a
any movie where the
montage,
master's like,
yeah.
go do this. It's like, I can't do that. It's like, no, you have to go do that. And so
Yeah.
he gets really frustrated, and the system kicks him out after 15 seconds every time he tries. And his mentor, she's like, all right, today, doors. I want you to imagine
Yeah.
every single door you can imagine. And he spends bored to tears 8 hours like thinking about wooden doors and metal doors and garage doors and doors that open halfway and doors with windows in them. And he's like he's bored to tears. He gets home to his apartment at the end of the night. He's like, oh, I didn't think of that one. There's another door, right? And so
Right.
his mentor has him do this. It's like, now you're going to do windows. Now you're going to do sort of entryways. Now you're going to do, roof materials, whatever. And so it is a little bit like this martial arts training montage where the master says, go punch this 1,000 times, go do 1,000 sit-ups, go run up and down the mountain 20 times. But it builds these foundational skills. And then he accidentally gets it one night. He's just kind of noodling around, thinking about a beach house that his engineering firm is bidding on. And, he thinks about the flow down the sand dunes and the view, and he's just kind of playing with it. He's not going in super hardcore. It's not an assignment. He's just playing.
Yeah.
And he kind of thinks about it a little bit and gets into the mode, and then all of a sudden he pops out and he's done, and he looks and it's been 14 minutes instead of 22 seconds or something.
Yeah.
And he has this fear of like, what if I can never do it again? But it describes how he goes in and he feels sort of on the one hand, like unmoored, like the ground disappears out from under him and he's unbounded. But instead of panicking, he sort of allows the expansiveness of the consciousness, which is the computer system holding the details for him of all the things he's thinking. And so learning to sort of give in this free fall, to give up control, to stop trying to think about it too analytically, but instead just imagine, just sort of dream it. And that's how you get there. And he learns how to do that. So that for me, like that's the breakthrough. That's that chapter is the highlight of the whole book for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's really beautiful. And the concept of organic engineering or Taoist engineering is so handy. And I feel like it, I don't know how to say this word. Is it presage? Right? Presage? Like the presages vibe coding, where like.
Sure. Could be. Yeah.
In a sense that, you're interfacing with this thing that it's like, it holds a lot more information than you ever will.
Yes.
You'll ever be.
It's a mediating layer between you and the outcome that is expansive.
Yeah. And, but obviously it's vibe coding isn't as cool as what's going on with them.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet. I found a passage, I think describes sort of the appeal of the approach in a way that I thought was really compelling, which is, let's see. Normally, because of airflow, room size, room adjacency, exposure, and window size, different rooms have different temperatures. The system for Wuxi complex monitors temperature and humidity, but for an organic system, temperature is relative. My hands and feet are cooler than my head and chest. If I am sitting, I will find the room colder than if I'm up and standing around. And different people respond to temperature in different ways. Some are perpetually cold, some aren't. We are sensitive to light as well. A well-lit place feels subjectively warmer than a dark place, and radiant heat from a window may heat one small area differently than another. The Wuxi complex system also monitors the people jacked into it. So there's always this notion of like buildings and places knowing who you are.
Yeah.
Throughout the book. So I'll just stop there. But like, oh no, this is great. People tell the system they are cold or warm, and it adjusts. People, in fact, become nerve endings for the system, which is like incredible. And it's I think this is a very prescient text in the sense that like technology companies are already using us as instruments, right, to gather
Yes.
data about the world and stuff like that. And so
Yes.
we are jacked into them in this way. And it's interesting to see how like sort of I just predict a future of more connectivity and more sensors everywhere. And
Yes.
this is a pretty interesting vision of what that might
Yeah.
shape up to be like.
Yeah. One and to your point about sensors, right? We all carry our sensors with us everywhere.
Right.
But the world envisioned here is they've sort of leapfrogged the device phase, or they've done away with the device phase because people have their jacks, which they plug into the wall to watch the sports or whatever. But they're constantly talking about people reading in the book, it's flimsies, right? But printouts. People in the subway are reading printouts, and so they're not. It's not a Gibson thing where you're jacked into the net and it's all in your head, and it's not a I'm stuck on my digital device. It's people still print out, and then when they need to connect, they physically go connect. So it's not the always on, except in the description, like you said about some of these smart buildings. Not all the buildings are smart, right? His apartments in Brooklyn are like crumbling 100-year-old things that were built back in the day.
But he still has to like tell people to recognize guests or something like that. There's still like some security layer that's smart.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. That can be pasted on. Do you know paste layering?
Oh yeah, go for it. To explain it. I love paste layering.
Okay, so I'm going to get the details wrong, but the concept is that there's a hierarchy of malleability, or a hierarchy of the speed with which things can change. And I forget where the origin came from, but I think it was Stuart Brand who sort of popularized it. And the book is called How Buildings Learn. But the notion is it's like site, structure, shape, systems, surface, and in this increasing layer of speed, of flexibility. So it's very easy to paint a room. It's very easy to move the furniture. So that's like the surface level. On the other end of the spectrum, site, you can't move the site. It's a much bigger change to move the structure of a thing, and things like the plumbing and the electrical, the systems in between can move. And this has been used as a metaphor for you can use it for your website, right? It's very easy to change the style and the aesthetic of your website. Changing navigation takes a little more work. Re-architecting the whole thing technologically, the foundation of it takes a lot more work. But also as a metaphor for society, right? And things that change fast and slow in society. And so trends come and go, and the analysis is that we use these as ways of testing new ideas that change quickly. And then the larger conceits and conventions and social and political structures and governmental and economic structures are much slower to change. They're lower down on that pace layering hierarchy. And the stuff that moves quickly and changes, when we find good stuff, it sticks ideally. And the stuff that is a trend that doesn't has less value or less perceived value doesn't stick around as much. So what were we talking about before we got to pace layering?
I was saying how he lives in an old building, but it has a sort of security function, right? Which can be
that can be layered on.
Well, yeah. So actually, on this note, in terms of pace layering and society adapting to changes and things like that over time, somewhere I will put in the show notes a link to the pace layering diagram. That's like
the class.
Nature, culture, law. It's like law, culture, governance, fashion is up at the top. Doing whatever it does. But there's clearly there's a policy or like regime and conventions around people jacking into systems. So everyone is a cyborg in this way, and that they're constantly jacking into things, tools, buildings, whatever, the network somehow. This idea of kite races, which is a really wonderful, fun chapter, or a couple chapters describing these daredevil racers that race kites, that they're jacked into the kites so that they're able to sort of physically have an embodied experience of of the kite itself, and then they race. But then the people who watch are also jacked in, experiencing whatever the racers are feeling.
Yes.
And this is twice in the book where this comes up, this idea that active systems are illegal because they're addictive. And so but my understanding of it is that you can jack into a system and receive information from it, but it's very rare for you to be able to be jacked into a system where there's sort of a two-way transmission of information, where basically you receive
Yes.
information and you're immediately sending feedback back to the system, because then the
Yeah.
system will addict you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't remember the detail with which it's explained, because so the kite racers were basically flying these augmented hang gliders over Manhattan, and
Yeah.
the description is, oh, if you have a weakness in one of the beams that's holding up the wing, you feel it as like an ache in your shoulder on that side. So it is
Yeah.
giving some feedback, and he's described how he's controlling the construction tech machines with the jack. So there's got to be a little bit of feedback there, but the illegal part is like it's hard to tell exactly. There's some illegal gambling that goes on, and when
Right.
you win, it stimulates your pleasure centers, and that's the feedback. That's the illegal part. And
Yeah.
so I didn't quite understand where the line was between this is a tool and it can tell you, when the wing is weakening, or what the power level of your tool is or something, versus this illegal sort of pleasurable feedback. But that's clearly the forbidden kind.
Yeah. Well, there's one, I think one context to which it comes up is when when he's in the hospital, like, so something happens, he needs like to get like his liver replaced or something.
Oh,
like, or a
he
kidney
has to grow a
regrown.
new kidney. He got an infection.
Yeah. So he's in some Chinese hospital, jacked into some system that is very active in terms of it. Like, it is monitoring him very closely, and it's affecting his mood.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, this nurse is so nice. And then later when he's not
Right.
checked into the system, he's like, this nurse is like totally mean. Like,
Yeah.
So like it was a system that was like very clearly manipulating him and his perception of reality.
Yes.
And he's like, I guess they're allowed to do this because it's like a Chinese hospital. Like,
And it's like administering his painkillers and putting him to sleep when it's time, and monitoring his vital signs while he grows this new kidney. And he's just the subject here.
That's right. But that's kind of what's interesting here is I think we're living through this right now. As you said, we all carry these sensors in our pockets, where many of us are addicted in some way to social media platforms or other digital technologies that are networked. And absolutely exploiting tons of people, like in all sorts of ways. And so it's kind of like there's like a very mild Butlerian jihad situation here, in the sense that they're like, the Chinese government or the ruling powers are like, yeah, we can't allow that to happen anymore. Like, we need to figure out a way to temper this. I'm kind of optimistic that hopefully it will take generations and many years for people to realize, like, yeah, there's certain websites you just really shouldn't go on. And if you do, it's going to ruin your life.
Yeah.
Like, it'll rot your brain. But, in this world, it's certain kinds of interacting with technologies become illegal.
Yep.
Because of this. So I'm curious. But tell me more about how you've sort of applied this.
Oh gosh. Well, so I work in software. I design tools. I accidentally wrote a master's thesis on good design process for diagram design, to make an effective diagram. Accidentally, because it wasn't required, but I was doing work with diagrams in this class, and my professor said you should keep going, so I did, and that led me to writing some books about data visualization and doing a lot of speaking. And I was hired about 10 years ago by Amazon Web Services to build QuickSight, which is their data viz platform. And for reasons which I still don't quite understand, they made me the product manager rather than the designer, which meant I got to own the definition of the product. And I didn't. We after I'd been there about 9 months, we hired another designer who ended up doing the page level Chrome and the buttons and the colors and all that detail. But I got to. It's not proper organic engineering, but I got this incredible opportunity to be the holistic designer of like an entire productivity app, like a fairly large product, more complicated than an email app, more, and it was the first real complex productivity application that they built at Amazon Web Services being developed at the same time as their sort of productivity, word processing and stuff. But before that, it had all been IT consoles. And so I got to say, these are the different pieces. These are the major areas. There's the data import area and the data cleaning area and the graphing area and the dashboarding and sharing area and the security. Like, define the connections between these, talk about what was going to go on every screen, I got to envision the whole thing. And it was the first time in my career that I had been given such a broad purview. And I had going into this, and I retained this sort of idealistic dream of like, how good could it be to have this larger product with one design point of view that sort of crafted the whole thing. Because typically when products get to any sort of scale, you have a team, right?
Right.
And is it Conway's Law, the whole like the conversation about how engineering organizations ship the org chart, right? And you can see where the org chart boundaries are by where the interfaces of the separate pieces of software are. I don't think it's Conway. I forget which one it is, but the point
I know
is,
you're talking. We look it up. Yeah,
there's frictions, and this has been true. Many of the places I've been where one designer's kind of got their one little way of doing it, and one designer's got their other way. And even if you have a components or a style guide, design system, there's always a little room for personal expression or personal reflection of the designer's taste or choices or biases in the choices. So things aren't quite fully symmetrical across different pieces of a platform. And so my dream here, partially inspired by the book, is like, if one person had the vision for the whole thing, for better or for worse, you would have a more consistent experience across whatever the breadth of the scope was. So it was really exciting for me a decade ago to be able to design a fairly large piece of software as this individual point of view, rather than saying that team does important data management and this team does data cleaning and this team does the graphing and this team does the dashboarding and that team does sharing and security, right?
Right.
So that was pretty cool. But
amazing.
But the concept has stayed with me, decades later. Like, wouldn't that be amazing to dream your designs?
Yeah.
So
are you familiar with a pattern language?
I am. I flipped through it. I have not read it deeply.
Well, yeah, I don't know if anyone's read. I'm sure there are people who've read it. I think I may have made this joke before. It's like the Bible, like
You
very few people like
read it.
Read it cover to cover. Yeah, it's like a thing that you go to. And it's written by design to be like that. But
yes.
It is, the idea of organic engineering, it's so compelling to think, because what's so great about a pattern language, and we talked about it on a previous episode of this podcast, is just knowing that the book exists. It's like, okay, there's a book that has answers about all these things.
Yes.
And
yes.
You've written books about design. It's sort of like there are answers to a lot of these questions.
Yes.
I remember I had a colleague once, like a coworker, sort of laugh at me when I was like, oh, well, I mean, a column of text should be something like 60 characters per row. And she's like, LOL. Like, she's like, who says that? I'm like, I mean, think about it. Like, you don't want a very, very wide column of text because your eyes are tracking and everything like that. Like, there's an answer. Like, people have sort of figured this out.
Yes.
Like, what is the sweet spot between, reading 2 words per line and reading 200 words per line?
Right.
And this is a really interesting thing about pattern libraries and stuff like that have been collected over time. But then now all of this sort of being hoovered up by large language models is that we are at a point where, like, yeah, I can imagine jacking into a system, so to speak, and it just being like, look, these are all the sensible defaults, and these are all the things you should be thinking about.
Yes, smart defaults, man. I could write a lecture about smart defaults.
Go for it.
Well, I'm going to take this another direction for a second. One of the book, I have a bookshelf over there with 3 or 4 meters of data viz and design books, but I have a few books here. I don't know how much of this can be on the recording. This is the mantle of the room I'm in, and it's covered in cat hair removal technology and design books.
Okay.
This book. So this is Jennifer Tidwell. Designing Interfaces. This is the 3rd edition. This is a catalog. It's a source book, and so you flip through and you look up list, or you look up table, or you look up 2-panel versus 3-panel design, and it is a catalog of useful patterns and it's done very nicely in terms of this is when this is useful, and these are sort of the constraints of this pattern. And if you need, we're going to look at list, and if you have multiple fields that really need to be related or sorted on, maybe you don't want a list, maybe you want a table, go look at table in the next chapter. And it's not, it is so a pattern language is an architecture book and is a hypertext collection of different things of architecture, from town square down to hallway and arcade and window and bench, right? And the hypertext relationship of how you would put a bench into an arcade into a town square. This book is not quite that, in that these are not related necessarily in the same way, but it is a documented collection of standard patterns. And there's so much power and there's so much leverage in not reinventing those wheels each time. And so I have not dropped this. I'm coming back around to strong defaults. So I've done a lot of teaching and a lot of lecturing about data viz. And the unfortunate answer that nobody wants to hear is probably you should just use a bar graph. And nobody wants to hear it because bar graphs are boring and they're not cool and they're not sexy. And I'm like, yeah, but listen, if you as a designer are putting something into the world and it is novel, first you have to invent that language. Hopefully you do this with intention and it's not just arbitrary. First you have to invent the language. Then you have to teach that language to your audience. And once you've taught that language, then you can start to talk about the actual content that you care about.
Right.
And it's a lot of effort to invent a new language and to communicate a new language. And the content that you have has to be valuable enough to your audience that they're willing to take the time to learn the language that you've invented to communicate your thing. And the marginal value of the content formatted in your new language has to be powerful enough. That lift has to be worth it to learn a new language. Because if I could communicate it at 84% efficiency with a bar graph, and I have to spend 30% more brain cells to get 10% more knowledge out of your brand new format, it's probably not worth it for everybody, right? So the antidote to this is we use strong defaults. And defaults are great, and there's all these studies on how powerful defaults are, and ways of imposing or introducing or gently inviting people to participate with defaults or not. But the short version is that a lot of the times standards or conventions are there because they have been shown to be effective, and that's true everywhere. And so every year there's somebody comes up with a radical new design for a bicycle, or somebody comes up with a radical whatever typography or a different way of navigating a website. And the bicycle ones, like the standard double diamond frame bicycle, I have one here. Is older than cars.
Yeah.
That design is really effective, and it's a way to get a very strong, very light metal structure that is very, very flexible in terms of body size. It's very, very flexible in terms of the environment you want to build the bicycle for. Like the double diamond really works well. And so there's a million other variations that involve, hanging beams and suspension and taking one of these out, and that's fine too. But the problem that most of those are solving isn't the double diamond doesn't work for my situation. Usually the problem that's solving is we want someone to notice us because we're doing something different. And that's a very different problem space, right?
Yeah.
And so again, if you're going to depart from the conventions and the standards, which ought to be your default, is to stick with those. If you're going to depart from them, you have to have a lot more value to offer in the new way you're proposing to do it. Because if you don't have a lot more value to offer, you're going to spend a lot of effort and you're not going to come out with a superior solution.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a masterclass right there. That's amazing.
And I will say, and there are definitely bicycle designs that don't follow that. Typically these days, mountain bikes with a rear suspension, and that's credible because the rear wheel's got to move up and down. And we've spent 30 or 40 years working on how to do that effectively. 30 years maybe. Yeah. So that's evolving still. But if you're not moving the rear wheel vertical, or you don't have some other extreme case like I'm folding this up, or I'm building a cargo bike, or some very, very different use case, for the standard use case of a human being rolling around on the streets, man, the double diamond is great. And then there's versions like the Dutch bike, which are solving a different sort of a problem, which is like step through and easy on and off for people. And there's variations, but those variations exist. The successful ones exist to solve specific problems like downhill mountain biking, a bike I can fold up and take on the train with me, a bike that's really easy for people of all sizes and abilities to step onto and off of in the city. Right? There's a problem, a well-defined problem space that those frames are a suited solution to, not just we're going to do it different because it's cool. So defaults, love defaults.
Love it. Yeah. And just this insight that like, you just be kind of on the lookout for people who are doing something merely to draw attention to their cool thing.
Yeah.
This is why, I mean, when Gina was on the podcast, we talked about Gina Trapani's my board chair for the nonprofit that I run. We go way back, but like, I always just feel kind of like apologetic with everyone that I'm like, I insist on designing all of our own websites for our company.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just like, I really want Spartan websites that are very, very fast and are like information forward. Like I do not, this is where like I bristle. I mean, I think you'll appreciate this as a designer, hiring most kind of pedestrian designers that are like, oh, I'm going to make your site look really cool. And I'm like, I want the site to look credible and to be fast and for people to understand what we're about. That's mostly good typography. Like there's just like, it's a matter of taste in a lot of cases. Not that our websites are perfect. Like,
sure. No, but they're probably better than they could be, right?
For sure.
The punchline, the end of the last step of my 4-step design process when I'm teaching data visualization, or really it works for any kind of design, any kind of communication that you're designing. But the last step is formatting, which is the typography and the color and the annotation and interaction. And the short version there is that should be used to enhance your ability to communicate effectively, to call attention to that which is important. And there are situations where you are calling attention to your brand or your identity that makes it stand out in the world. And that's part of your brand. And then you may sacrifice some legibility, and that's a choice that is being made intentionally. But until you know that that's what you're doing, you default to more legible, for example. So the short version of that is function first, sexy second.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
And if you're corroding the accessibility, the legibility, the navigation, as you depart from any default, what's the cost? What's the cost to your consumer? Who you're going to lose? How much more effort is it going to cost somebody to interact with your content if you're making it harder because you want to make it look cool or different?
Right. This is you've reminded me also of I'm sorry, I'm making all these callbacks to other podcasts. So, I guess this will become a thing.
I'll go listen.
Wait, Tim, you should. Tim O'Reilly was our first guest, very, very generously, and he talked a lot in that episode. I should go back and listen. It's really good. I mean, like this is the joy of this podcast. I edit the episodes, and I wanted to be extra careful with his, so like I listened to it a bunch. But he talks about meme engineering, and I don't remember if he uses that term explicitly. But what you were saying before about like what is the benefit of this new thing you're bringing into the world? And so meme engineering, or the creation of new concepts, it's like you have to figure out how will you get a concept into people's minds? Like you were saying, like the bar chart, like. We have generations of people who have been trained on how to read the bar chart, right?
And every tool in the world can make it, and it needs almost no explanation. Like it's a fabulous standard.
Yeah. But that's generations of work that happened. I mean, and it started out with somebody being like, hey, we have to explain to you how this works. But to your point, like it's such a powerfully evocative tool that it works. Like it's worth the trouble. And, I think Tim was talking about, just the creation of the concept of like Web 2.0 and then Gov 2.0.
Yes.
Like it seems so obvious that those concepts, like, it makes total sense. It's like, there's so much thought that goes into figuring out what does that mean? And can you come up with a term like Web 2.0 and really have it land and mean something for people?
Yeah.
It's not easy. But it's such an art, and I would just say like it's another form of design. This idea of meme.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tim is a really great thinker, and he has an ability to really clearly articulate these ideas that are important.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for him. I've met him a little bit, and I mean, he's my publisher.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but I have a lot of respect for his ability to think through and to communicate these ideas clearly, and he is very intentional about where effort goes. And he wrote, quite some time ago, a blog post about work on stuff that matters. Right.
Yeah.
Very straightforward. I think it was just 3 bullet points, but to really have people at least spend some of their time being intentional about where their effort was going and how it was impacting the world.
Yeah.
That also actually has been sort of an ongoing influence on me. So thanks for that, Tim.
Oh, good. All right. Shout out to Tim. I think what we're describing, these cases of engineering and design, is really having a much more sort of like holistic, maybe form of empathy or something like that. Like again, that passage that I read about engineering ability, it's like, you got to understand, like, there are many ways for a human to be in a space.
Yeah.
Like there are many ways, like they're going to, as they move through the world, there's all sorts of nuance that you can pay attention to. And to the extent that you can be really thoughtful of that stuff, you're going to be a better designer.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I absolutely. I have a talk. I gave a 5-minute and a 45-minute version of the long version, actually, at the O'Reilly Design Conference in 2016, called Guaranteed Successful Design.
I love it.
which is a title I stole. But anyway, it's in the talk. But part of it is you going back to Tim O'Reilly, going back to work on stuff that matters, and also to this concept of holistic, is that you, as you zoom out in what you are considering of your design, you see more of the world, and if you can incorporate more of that thinking into your picture, the more holistic you can get. The higher your chance of being successful is, right?
Yeah.
And that talk, Guaranteed Successful Design, is broken down into execution, design it right, but also choice. How do you pick? Design the right thing. And it doesn't matter how good your execution is if you're designing the wrong thing. And many of the, let's say, predictable failures of design that we have understood in the last couple of decades, we look at these crash and burn failures of products. We're like, what were they thinking? Why did they think that was a good idea, right? And it is often people who fell in love with the concept or fell in love with the technology and weren't willing to zoom out, interrogate the value, interrogate the feasibility, interrogate the public appeal. Is this even a product that the world needs? Is there a better way to spend my effort? There's great examples, 2 great examples of this, both environmental. One from a friend of mine from college, Jerome Bauman, who is an economist, and he said at one point, he's like, look, the problem with recycling plastics or whatever is that it's hard to recycle plastics. They're filthy, they're greasy, and the amount of energy it takes to clean them and get them to the point where they're recyclable is more than the cost of just making new ones. He's like, even glass. He says, I'm not going to spend 10 minutes worth of hot water scrubbing out a glass peanut butter jar to get it clean enough to recycle. It's not worth it. That's not where the energy is most efficiently used. Shout out number 2, also from Reed College. My best friend from Reed is a guy named Jeremy Faludi. He's now a professor of green engineering in Delft, the best green university in the world.
Oh.
And he talks about a California office building will get some subsidy to put in low flow water on the sinks, and that'll save some number of thousands of gallons a year. And that same amount of money, if you gave it to a California farmer to make their watering or their irrigation more efficient, would save like 1,000 times as much water as the sinks in the bathroom in the office building in San Francisco. Same amount of money, right? And so, not to say that we shouldn't put efficient sinks, efficient faucets in an office building, but if you zoom out a little bit and you can say, if saving water is our goal, where is the most effective place that we can spend that money and that resource? And to me, this is very much in this holistic view, right? Zooming out. So in my talk, which I'm looping back around to, the answer is like, you can't see outside your box. That's why it's your box. You can't think outside the box.
Right.
But other people have different boxes, and they're different size and different shape, and they're different places. And when you talk to other people and you include other perspectives, you get a bigger box to think within. And if you can think more broadly, you can solve broader, more interesting, more impactful problems.
Yeah. Yeah. You just reminded me of two things. I think actually I attribute this anecdote to Jen Palka, who's Tim's wife.
Yep.
But some insight about how some airport optimized, they're like, we got to get the baggage claim closer to the gates so that people don't have to walk so far.
Yes.
And then, of course, they show up at the gates and they have to wait forever for the luggage, and they're mad, because they're waiting so long. And then this other one's from a TED Talk, but it was a guy talking about like the Eurostar, the channel, like the train that goes from London to Paris. And they're like, they spent like billions of dollars upgrading the track because it'll shave like half an hour off the time of the ride. And he's like, hey, you could spend a fraction of that and hire like male and female models to just hand out champagne for free on the like, and people would be like, we don't care how long this trip is. They'd be like, this is great. That's fine. I don't need to get there half an hour earlier. Like, you could make it longer. I'll be stoked. But to your point, like if you're an engineer solving like optimizing for speed, you're going to look at one particular, or whatever, you're going to look at it in a very narrow way. So, actually, you also reminded me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying that it's all super interesting.
Yeah. You reminded me, though, of another bit that I took notes on the book. It's very relevant to the whole work on what matters thing, is that, so this character, and again, I forget her name, but and this is sad to say it, the ugly girl, the boss's daughter. She's involved in like a political group where, there's a bunch of people always talking about, we're going to start a commune or something like that. And they want to start a commune and just, blah, blah, blah. And she talks about moving to Mars. She's like, I think we might try to start the commune on Mars. I'm really interested. Oh, that's another element of the book, is that they're colonizing Mars, and there are people colonizing Mars in the book. But she says, I think it would be a good thing to start over in a place where people pay attention to what is important. And it's a great line.
Yeah.
Because I think I just always chalk this kind of thing up to a delusion, and it's a delusion that I attribute to a lot of maybe not designers, but people who want to hire designers, is that they're like, build me the software that will tell me what I need to know. Like, it'll show me the data that I need, so then I'll know what to do. And I'm like, that's probably not going to happen. And like, yes, you can go to some very resource constrained environment where the scope of what you have to pay attention to is like very narrow, and you have no choice.
Yes.
So maybe that's one way to do it. But
this is the startup dream, right? And this is why the myth is the startups in garages is they don't have the resources to mess about with anything that's not crucial.
Yeah.
And the same thing at Mars, right? Is they're on a much more we get one of the thread lines is some of the colonists, and like they're checking for air leaks every week, right? And they're waiting a year for replacement parts to come from Earth because so they're the scope of their world is much smaller, and their opportunities are much smaller. They're not going to drink a beer and view the kite races over Manhattan, right? They're like checking for air leaks and waiting for the pump part. And it has a way that scarcity has a way of helping you prioritize.
Yeah. That was another interesting insight I thought from the book, is that, there's a time lag between, they have video chat, between Earth and Mars, but there's this like 8-minute delay or whatever, however long it takes for, I guess, light to travel back and forth.
Depends on where the planets are relative to each other.
Oh, that too. Yeah, that's another part of their calculus. That's right. So, but what's fascinating about it is just that, like, but they do it anyway, because like human to human knowledge transfer in as close to real time as you can get is just like unbeatable.
Yeah, and the commentary about Zhang becomes this tutor for this Russian
guy. Yeah,
and they get like an hour tutorial session once a week, and the guy gets like 4 questions. Like he asks a question at the top of the hour and gets his answer like 15 minutes later, and they're both sort of chatting and killing time for the 8 minutes or whatever it is each way. And then, but he's like, okay, I got 4 questions. That's the Martian budget of your hour.
Yeah.
For his tutoring.
But still like unbeatable, because you don't have those brains on Mars, and so you have to be able to tap into one on Earth, and
Yep.
that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
I
Systems
mean,
engineering.
yeah. But again, I mean, I just think I don't know what this means because I'm so averse to hype and just really want to downplay all hype waves, but I'm convinced that large language models are like probably as big a deal as everyone's saying they are. Like,
and we're not there yet, right? I keep seeing headlines go by about like, yeah, but the engineering efficiencies aren't what people are claiming yet. And when was debugging someone else's code ever faster than debugging your own code? And things like that, right? The metrics. Well, I think it depends a lot on the use case, right? And I think the more general the use case, the less effective we're seeing them being so far. I have a friend of mine who wanted to combine some different bread recipes. And like, the LLM is not a baker and doesn't understand that you can't arbitrarily combine elements from two different baking recipes because it's chemistry. Baking is chemistry. You can't just arbitrarily combine them and have a rational output. There's no knowledge there, right?
Right.
I think in some very constrained, well-defined spaces, when there's a lot of guardrails and a very finite amount of content, then it's useful for some of that. But
well, this is why it's so useful for coding, right? You have a huge corpus.
But is it though? But is it actually proven to be useful yet for coding?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like for little things, to your point, you still have to debug if you're going to production, especially if you're going to be charging for it, you've got work to do. But it's been trained on
up to par.
Yeah, exactly. There's all sorts. It's not, beware of people vibe coding stuff and launching it in production and thinking, that they're not going to get bitten in the ass. But like in terms of like writing little scripts, debugging, I mean, for me, I just do it for like Hugo websites,
so
little
small,
templating
right?
things,
small and
small stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. Not systems, but they're good at this sort of stuff because there's a large corpus of training data that is out there that is only out there because it's functional, right? Like all the open source code that it's looking at is like, usually it works.
Mostly,
otherwise, and of course, I'm sure the models are able to weigh things appropriately based on GitHub stars or whatever it is. But no, I do think that I'm just imagining like, again, the near future when we're colonizing Mars, will embeddings, be able to encode and encapsulate in very, very highly compressed corpuses of knowledge that will be very useful on Mars. So I would argue that it still wouldn't replace the human to human interaction with an 8-minute delay, but it'll help. It'll probably help with a lot of troubleshooting.
Better tools, right? Better reference materials, but all that's predicated on the completeness and accuracy of the training set, right?
Yep. Yeah. I have many other thoughts about that stuff.
That's a whole other episode.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if I miss anything else on the notes. Actually, I think that's it. That's worth commenting on. Anything else you want to bring up from the book or thoughts you've had as you've reread it?
So he goes through a couple of different jobs and different environments where he's living and different interactions with different humans at different levels. And at the end, he's back teaching in Brooklyn, and he's sort of obliquely challenging the dominant Marxist political theory. Which to me is this very like at the beginning of the book, he goes out drinking and dancing with his buddies and going to watch the kite races every night, and every night he's like, man, I got to get up early. I shouldn't go out, and I should be studying to become an engineer. And instead I'm going to go out and watch the kite races and get drunk with my friends. Right. And so this shift of him and the things that inspire him to actually study, and then he falls off the wagon, and then he gets inspired to study again, and then he does it and levels up. And there's so many comments in the last chapter about him, like, Oh man, these young guys cruising are so young, and I remember that the old guys looked so old to me then, and I'm almost 30,
Yeah.
and there's just all these, as you've said a bunch of times, it's a coming of age story, but it's sort of articulated in these interesting ways where um, the social behaviors, but also the fact that he's teaching and he's like articulating political theory and a challenging political theory, not just regurgitating, but he's using like scientific and systems analysis to analyze political theory. Like this is not the way that he was thinking 5 years earlier at the start of the book.
Right. Right.
Right. He's clearly put thought into it, and just how he is operating at a different level of maturity, a different level of being in the world. Um, through, and he's been through a bunch of hard times since then. He's prioritized. He's working on things that matter now in his life.
Yeah.
Right. Which actually, I think so. Tim O'Reilly's the three, if I'm getting this right, the three things in his work on stuff that matters is work on stuff that matters more than the money. Not that you can't make money, but things you work on more than money. Create more value than you capture.
Yes.
And so platforms like the iPhone or Amazon Web Services make staggering amounts of money, but they're making even larger amounts of money for the people who use those platforms to do their own thing, right?
That's right.
So the third thing that Tim O'Reilly talks about in working on stuff that matters is the long view of not just the next software release or the next financial quarter or the next job, but like think about the long-term impact of where is your labor going? What is the ultimate impact, value, cost, whatever of the things that you're doing? And so at the end of this book, Zhang has offered these very lucrative jobs living in the middle of nowhere in the desert in Arizona or something, building not very attractive sort of buildings that can survive in the desert after the climate apocalypse. And the money's there, but it's not inspiring to him. And for him, even though it's not as lucrative, the teaching, communicating these skills, organic engineering, you can't get this training in the United States. There's so few of them in the country, is more compelling to him at a variety of levels. And staying in New York where his community is. And the whole book, everyone's like, why would you leave China? China's where the action is. And he says, I'm a New Yorker at heart. I want to go back to New York. And he doesn't talk about, I can't stay in China because I'm gay and they'll kill me. But, that's the subtext for sure. But he doesn't even want to live in Philadelphia. He doesn't want to live in Virginia. He doesn't want to live in New Jersey. He wants to live in New York because he's a New Yorker. And for him, that's a crucially important thing. And I feel the same way. Like I have never gone to go work for a California company because I don't want to live in California.
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life in the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Portland. I live in Seattle. I like it here. California is miserable, man.
We had this conversation earlier today. Our 10-year-old son asked, what do you think the most famous state is? And I was like, oh, there's an obvious answer to this. And my wife is from California. She's from San Diego. I went to UCSD. And anyway, we met down there. So we lived in California for 10 years, but it's like, yeah, California, like the whole world talks about California. And I'm like, it's fine. Like,
but
it's
you
whatever.
know what? But I don't think it always was. I think that's more recent. I think if you'd asked people 50 years ago, they would have said New York.
Probably. I mean, that makes sense.
California's got Hollywood, but prior to the tech boom, New York was the global city, right?
Right. Yeah. I just think there's just so much lore about California. That, but yeah, who knows? But this idea, it's very funny because when I was also about 28, 29, I was finishing my master's degree, and it's not visible here, but I bought the desk that I'm sitting at right now from a friend of mine. I'll have to shout him out, Jared Rustin, who makes beautiful wooden furniture.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, it's just a chemical process that happens in your mind at some point where you're like, I'm settling down now. And I was just like, I'm not going to do IKEA kind of throwaway furniture. Like I want like real furniture now for some reason. And now I've had to haul this enormous heavy wooden desk around with me ever since. But we're up here and we're like, we're never moving this thing again. So that's
nice.
All right.
A couple of years after I got married, my wife and I bought a house, first real estate I've ever owned. And my brother's a carpenter, and he built our dining room table. And it's big. and it's 2 inches thick, and it seats 10 people. And I think it lives with the house. I don't think we'd want to try to move it even. Like I'm emotionally attached to it. It's absolutely gorgeous, but it is a huge slab of wood. We moved it from one room to the other once, and it's going to stay there, you know? But it was time. It was time to invest in like a massive, heavy, stable thing because we were in the house.
Yeah.
There's the metaphor right there.
It's true. No, and it's just very funny how this book again captures that process so well of like getting to that age where you're like, he's like, I'm going to make my apartment look nice and like figure out how to do that. And it's just so fun. It's just like, oh yeah, I've been in my late 20s too. It's just like a thing that starts happening to you.
Yeah. Took me a little longer.
It's a mystery.
But
yeah. Well, thank you for this. Again, thanks. What a gift this book is. I hope people read it. It was just really, it felt so good to read. I just really enjoyed it. It's a great vibe.
Yeah.
So.
I appreciate the opportunity to read it again. I've read it a number of times, but it's been several years now, probably more than 10 years, I think, since I read it. So it was a treat to go back and experience it again.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. We'll probably do it again someday.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jed. It's good talking with you.
Thanks. Bye. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. Covered a lot of ground as usual. This is a good one. I mean, they're all good, I think. But this is one that like really kind of stayed on the rails. I feel like we had like such a good practical conversation about life working in technology and the nuances of design and shaping your career. Very on theme for the book, and just a really, really great conversation with someone who's had such an interesting career building really important technology that a lot of people use and being really thoughtful about it. So it was a real joy to get an excuse to spend so much time talking to Noah about this. And I just have to thank him again for introducing me to the book. And always nice to also get to do a lot of shout outs to Tim O'Reilly, who this podcast wouldn't be what it is without him joining. And if you haven't checked out the first episode of the podcast, I recommend going back and listening to that. It's a great conversation with Tim. So thanks as always for listening. Thanks as always to Secret School for recording the intro music to this podcast. Secret School has a new album out, a remix album of the last album, which is called Enough. So this is the Enough remixes, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. This outro music is a song called 3/10 of the Population by We. And if you have recommendations on stuff to read or people to talk to, please don't be shy. You can email me. It's jed@texontext.net. And we will be back next month. We're going to be talking about the book Piranesi by Susanna Clark, and with a guy named Matt Price. And it is awesome. And that is a podcast that definitely goes off the rails. So thanks for listening as always. See you next month. Bye.